Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Today, I am going solo because I'm going to talk about one of the most common things that we get questions around, and that is choosing a good mineral. Now, we actually don't get a whole lot of emails from people asking us what's a good mineral or how do I choose a good mineral. What we get instead are emails from people who have problems with their goats that sound like an obvious mineral deficiency. And they say, oh no, it can't be that. They get a mineral, a mineral. I am so sad to say that they are not created equal. Unfortunately, there are a lot of minerals out there that are a complete waste of money. They are incredibly overpriced salt. There are minerals that are like 95% salt. And that's not what your goats need. Your goats need the big things that they need from their minerals are going to be primarily copper, selenium, and zinc, because those are the three things that goats are most likely to become deficient in. And if it's a doe that's pregnant or in milk, she also needs a good amount of calcium. So, one of the things we have a goat mineral comparison chart that we share with people, and we update this every 6 months. One of our team members, Amy, goes to the websites for these 6 minerals on the chart and she checks to see if they have changed at all. And once in a while, somebody emails us to tell us that one has changed and we look into it. But usually we do catch all the changes because we are checking about every 6 months. Now, at the bottom of this chart, this time Amy added links to where she got the information. So if you want to check yourself to see if it's changed, then you can. This is dated August of 2024. She'll check again 6 months from then. Usually there's not a change, but about every year and a half, one or two of the companies changes. And there were some changes this time. So if you got the last one from us, I believe it was green. This one we made purple so that they jump out at you as being different. The purple one has the most up to date. And also, if you look at the bottom of the chart, it says updated as of August the 22nd. Now, this podcast will totally be valuable to you to listen to. So don't say, oh, never mind, I'm going to go to the website. But if you do go to the website, you can get a copy of this chart and print it out and take it with you to the feed store to compare it to what you have available there if you don't have one of the specific minerals that I recommend on the list. This is our goat mineral comparison chart, and you can see that the Sweetlix Meat Maker and the Purina goat minerals both have check marks above them. Now, the reason that I specify the Sweetlix Meat Maker and not the Magnum Milk is because the Sweetlix Meat Maker has twice as much calcium. The calcium to phosphorus ratio in Sweetlix Meat Maker and most minerals is 2 to 1. That's really what we want. We want around, 16 to 18% calcium for does that are pregnant and or milking. If you've got wethers, they don't need this. So weirdly enough, if you've got wethers, you could use Magna milk and they would be fine with that because they don't need a lot of calcium. Pregnant does and does in milk do need a lot of calcium. So that's why I specifically recommend the Meat Maker, why it has a green check mark above it. So you can see that some of these, just talking about the calcium here, you can see some of these others I do not recommend. Like the Redmond goat mineral here has only 4% calcium, which is really nothing. I mean, that's not helpful to a goat in milk or whatever. But and here's the problem because it's 76% salt. So this is one of those, but that makes sense. I mean, Redmond is a salt company. And so most of their products are just very high in salt. You notice most of these others are between 15 and 27% salt. They're not as much. So they're going to have higher amounts of actual, true, legitimate minerals in them. Now, the important things that you really want to look at are copper, because copper can be a problem. Copper deficiency can be a problem in some goats. Usually it's not bad. So if you're feeding the Purina, usually you don't have any problems with copper deficiency unless you've got sulfur and or iron in your well water, because those are copper antagonists. And so you might still need additional copper in addition to this. So somebody once was like really, he was complaining that Sweet Licks didn't have more copper in it because she had to give copper oxide wire particles as a supplement in addition to that. And the reality is that they can't put enough copper in there for everybody, because there is no perfect copper level. This is basically what goats would need, is somewhere between the 1700 and 2500 ppm is what they would be fine with, assuming that there are no copper antagonists in the environment. Now, a lot of people don't have copper antagonists, so this is all they need. They will do fine. If you have some, you might want to go with the Purina rather than the Sweet Licks, because it is higher in copper. It's 2500 and the Sweet Licks is around 1800. However, we have always stuck with Sweet Licks because we like to give our goats copper oxide for barber pole worm. We have episodes in here on using copper oxide for worms. So I'm not going to get into that now, but that's why we have not switched to Purina, because our goats are doing great with the Sweet Licks. And I like to be able to give them copper as my the first thing I try if they've got worms. And if I was giving them the Purina, I would be nervous doing that, because that's getting into a lot of copper now. So I would be worried about copper toxicity. But you can see these other ones have way less. Like the Mana Pro has only 1350 ppm copper. Redmond has 1000. And New Country and Do More, it's not even listed, which is frustrating, because copper is one of the most important things for goats. And I've got whole episodes on copper that you can listen to get more information on that. The next thing I want to talk about is selenium. Both Sweet Licks and Purina have 50 ppm selenium. And that's really what I look for pretty much anybody in the United States, unless you are in the Dakotas or the neighboring states close to the Dakotas. So if you're in Western Montana, then you're just like the rest of us. But if you're in, Eastern Montana, right next to the Dakotas, then you're probably going to have a lot of selenium in your soil too. So you don't need to have the high level of selenium that's in Sweet Licks and Purina. Your goats would be able to get away with the Mana Pro, and that would work. For zinc, that's the other thing that goats have a problem with in terms of deficiency. And the thing that gets confusing here for people is that when you look at some of the labels, like Sweet Licks has 1.2% zinc, whereas Purina has 4000 ppm, Mana Pro has 5500 ppm. And you're like, well, which one is more? Because one is percentage, one is ppm. 1% equals 10,000 ppm. So the reason that they use ppm is because it's less than 1%. And so rather than having, 0.4%, they have 4000 ppm. So the 1.2% that you have in Sweet Licks is the equivalent of 12,000 ppm. So if you want to compare them, apples to apples, then the zinc in Sweet Licks is 12,000 ppm. The Purina is 4,000 ppm. So you can see that the Sweet Licks has 3 times as much. This is another reason that I like to use Sweet Licks, because I like to use the copper oxide for barber pole worms. And your zinc to copper ratio should be around 4:1. And Sweet Licks has the highest zinc to copper ratio of any. Plus it has plenty of copper and plenty of zinc. So it's really unlikely for you to have a zinc deficiency problem if you're using Sweet Licks, because it has so much zinc in it. And this is why, it is a horrible idea for everybody to, people are really jumping on this Zinpro wagon now. I'm giving my goats Zinpro. Your goats probably don't need Zinpro, okay? Your goats only need Zinpro if they've got a zinc deficiency. And it's not that common, especially if you've got a good mineral. Now, you look at the New Country and the Do More, they don't list zinc at all in their guaranteed analysis. And so, if you're feeding one of those, then your goats might need zinc. But instead of, doing individual minerals, it's just so much easier if you buy a mineral that actually has what they need in it. So Like I said, I like the Sweet Licks because of the high level of zinc. And even back when we had goats, because we bought a very expensive water treatment system to try and get the sulfur out of our well water. And we're talking like a couple $1,000s for this water treatment system. It's huge, massive. It's like 5 feet tall. It uses chlorine. It's basically like we have our own water treatment plant to try and get the sulfur out of our water. But back before we got that, the water had a humongous amount of sulfur in it. And we were actually having to give our goats copper oxide 4 times a year. And even doing that every 3 months, we never had a problem with zinc deficiency in any of our does. The only time we had a problem with zinc deficiency was when we could not buy grass hay for our bucks one winter. And so the bucks were on alfalfa hay from like the beginning of November until, and then like by the middle of January, my bucks all had symptoms of zinc deficiency. And again, we have a whole episode on zinc deficiency, so you can learn more about that. The other thing I want to mention is that in Goats 365, we have a nutrition course that gets deeply into each of the minerals that your goats might be deficient in, to give you even more information about this. So basically, I wanted to do this episode because I get so many people asking, so many people don't realize that they're using a mineral that's not good, and they don't know how to figure out if it's good or not. So to summarize, the things that you really want to see is you want to see around 16 to 18% calcium with half as much phosphorus. You want to see salt. I really like salt that's like 15 to 20%. Purina is 27.5%, but their copper level is also higher. So the goats might not consume that much because of the high level of salt. The other thing is we want to see copper that is between 1700 and 2500. I do not recommend any minerals that hit 3000 because there's actually a published case study where several goats in a herd wound up with copper toxicity way back when a lot of people were using cattle minerals because there were no good goat minerals that had copper in them, back when they still sold the sheep and goat minerals. And some people realized like, oh, my goats need copper unlike sheep, but there weren't any good ones. So they bought a cattle mineral that had 3000 ppm copper in it. And some of their goats wound up with copper toxicity. So I don't like to get that high with the copper. And then the selenium, you want around 50 to 60 ppm selenium. And the zinc, for zinc, there's a couple things. Pretty much the higher the better. Like I've never seen anything more than 1.2%, and my goats have done fantastic on that for like the 15 years I've been using Sweet Licks. Even though we were supplementing with copper a lot of the time, because zinc and copper are antagonistic towards each other. So that means that they have to stay in balance. That's why it's important to know that there's that 4-to-1 ratio, and it can go a little one way or the other. But this is why, like, you don't want to give them Zinpro if they don't need it, because they can wind up copper deficient. And in addition to the possibility of copper toxicity, your goats could also wind up zinc deficient if they get too much copper. And I've seen that happen. So you don't want to supplement with something unless you know that there is like a legitimate reason to, not just because somebody on Facebook said, oh, I give my goats Zinpro every day and they're doing great. Because you have no idea why, like, well, why are your goats zinc deficient? Maybe they're not giving any kind of a mineral. Maybe they've just got a salt block out there, and this is the only zinc they're getting is the Zinpro. So you really cannot copy somebody else's nutritional plan without sitting down and, lining it up. Like, okay, what are you doing for the mineral? What do what kind of water do you have? What's in your soil? Because all of these things make a difference. So I hope that this has been helpful to you. And if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask in the comment section below the show notes.